You're also talking about the value of international investing, another underrepresented sector. You've got a large emerging markets ETF that's out there, the symbol AVEM, and you also have an ex-China one I thought was very interesting, AVEM. I'm sorry, I think that's it. So, the argument here is we've got 40% of U.S. corporate revenues are outside the United States, and the S&P's been outperforming in the last decade. So what does international investing get you? Make the case for international at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So I go back to kind of that global market opportunity set, right? Getting exposure to different economies, everything else. Certainly, you can make the argument, as you said, where some businesses in the U.S. are generating revenues outside the U.S. from those other countries. We still don't see that really show up in terms of if you look at long-term performance and the diversification that non-U.S. investing can bring you, right? We still think that having exposure to the companies that are domiciled there makes some sense. The emerging market strategy we have, we did launch, as you said, an ex-China strategy. That's AVXC. And there, it's investors looking for a little bit more control over how they're accessing China and then the way to China in the portfolio. So we felt like we can offer both of those strategies. We can still, what we're doing in terms of screening these companies, looking at the more attractive opportunities. When we do that in a multi-country or multi-region portfolio, we're doing it at the country level, and then giving you country weights that are similar to the betas you get from an index-based strategy. So in that sense, we aren't really making big country bets in these broader strategies. So excluding a single country and still offering kind of that broad diversification, that absolutely works for us. But Bob, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. I'm going to go back to valuations. When you think about non-US developed emerging markets, particularly if you think about small caps within there, again, just really, really wide spreads. And so from that standpoint, it's, I think at some point these things have to come back to fundamentals.
Yeah, it's amazing. We have an ex-China ETF. 10 years ago, we didn't have any of this, and now just in the last few years, a lot of international funds they have ex-China funds.
Ex-China. I mean, that's just the way the political winds are going right now. Yeah. We've now got tariffs on the major car makers in Europe and in the United States. To his point, though, that international diversification pays off the most when those valuation differences are the widest, right? This looks more like what we saw in 2010.
What are we dealing with, like 12, 13 times forward earnings on emerging markets,
versus,
Phil? What are we talking about?
Yeah, it's about as wide as we've seen for some time, just as Dave's pointed out. I looked at the average over kind of the last 20 years, and where the S&P trades versus EFA or versus EM, it's kind of about double as wide as it has been. Yeah. So that to me, again, and there's a lot of other news that can come up. There's a lot of other things that can impact this. So we don't think you can reliably time these things over short horizons, but for that longer horizon investor, it does look like an attractive opportunity.
All right. Any thoughts on the Fed at this point? We got a great CPI today. Everything's up. Even small caps are up 3% today, Phil. You'll be happy.
That was music to my ears, that CPI print, because you've seen a whole bunch of green strategies that are flashing them up. I think they've done a pretty good job. I think they've done a pretty good job. We saw, even with the news this morning, right? You saw what the market's pricing in terms of rate cuts. That went from 2 rate cuts this year. I think the probability jumped from 50 up to around 70%. So people are thinking about that. They think they're landing the plane quite well. The actual what's going to happen, right? We're going to see. I don't tend to forecast too much on that, but I think they've done a great job so far.